So we're going deeper into the practice of Tonglen. One of the things that we looked at last week was just the simple act of breathing. We are continuously taking in all the gifts and bounties of the planet, and we are on our exhalation offering the gifts of our breath to the plant world. And we're doing that without consciously thinking, I am breathing, I am offering, I am taking in, I'm offering. So I wanted to point that out really clearly, because sometimes we think the capacity to work with the teachings is way beyond us. But this idea of without a sense of self, just naturally taking in and naturally offering has always been a part of our physical life. And what we're bringing to it now is a heightened consciousness. The other thing I learned this week is that they've established scientifically that the simple act of breathing actually occupies half of our brain. So it takes half of our brain to breathe. And so now we're adding the other half. So we're fully alive when we're then consciously taking in the gifts of the planet and consciously offering to the plant world. The other thing that in a normal environment or an unaffected environment, the old days, we felt entirely safe breathing. So that is not so accessible now as it was when I was growing up, but there's a relaxed quality to breath for most of us. So with that sense of relaxation, now we're going to open up to a more full engagement. And I wanted to use Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen's teaching on Tonglen from his book, Samsara and Nirvana, Two Sides of the Same Hand. And I'm going to share that on the screen now, because I find that that's a tremendously helpful, gentle introduction to the text. Okay, so I'd like to read through it once. With a positive attitude of loving kindness and compassion, I give to the downtrodden sentient beings of the six realms all my happiness and roots of virtue without reservation. With a natural manner of Braveheart mind, I take into my mind stream every one of the qualities of abandonment and realization of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the three times. Excuse me. And this is a traditional construction in the Tibetan manner of doing things, where he puts, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to be capable of and want to understand fully, as the first two verses, and then goes on to explain how to do it. In samsara, from beginningless time through today, the sole cause bringing suffering is always my own self-fixation, fundamental non-knowing. I give this away right now without a second thought. So that is what the rest of the poem is going to address. Knowing that all sentient beings of the three realms have been my mother, I recall their kindness, wish to repay their kindness and connect to them with love. I generate compassion for them, then the mindset to attain enlightenment for their sake. I take all these mind trainings into the center of my heart. Without clinging or attachment, I give my entire bounty of resources and roots of virtue to these kind mothers, and in an authentic manner, like an illusion, like a mirage, I take on all their karma, afflictions, and suffering. Negative conditions are spiritual teachers. Spirits and demons are emanations of conquerors. Sickness is a broom sweeping away defilements and obscurations. All sufferings are dharmata's waves. So that is the particular section of the book on Tonglen. So I think where we get confused as students is the difference between aspiring to be able to work with Tonglen and then engaging in Tonglen. And I think it's because we have a particularly unrealistic understanding of the process and time. So one of the things I like about Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen's teaching is setting the goal and setting, the topic that we wish to understand, this concept of wanting to be able to be present for the suffering of the world, wanting to open to that, and at the same time seeing that projection of a separate self interrupts that opening, interrupts with fear, interrupts with overwhelm, and then getting stuck and thinking, well, I can't do this, I'm not good at this. No manner of studying, even though we spent a year on this text, is going to assist me because I always get stuck in my fear and in my overwhelm. And what we ignore is Shanti Deva's very early teaching that is right in that prayer we said this morning. Just as the Sugatas of old gave birth to bodhicitta and progressively established themselves in the training of a bodhisattva, so too, for the benefit of beings, I shall give birth to that bodhicitta and progressively train myself in that discipline. So I think Shantideva had a very clear-eyed view of the difference between aspiring and engaging, and the natural bridge from aspiring to engaging. And one young Rinpoche, when I was in India, said he was preparing himself to be a lineage holder. And so the Dalai Lama was mentoring him, and he could invite all the great teachers to give him teachings on bodhicitta. And he said what he was really looking at and understanding as a 16-year-old is that it's like a pendulum. We cultivate the aspiration, we cultivate compassion for the suffering of the world, all the different sufferings, that are so clear to us. We cultivate first the capacity to keep our eyes open, not to block out the suffering, and then to feel with, listen to, stand beside, walk with the suffering of sentient beings. And at the same time, we're training. So he said it's like a pendulum, so that we're training, building our capacity to keep our eyes open and not numb ourselves to suffering. And then at a certain point, the pendulum swings and propels itself naturally. So what we ignore is the training side that we're building really, really carefully. And you know what happens with a pendulum, if we just take it a little bit and drop it, it swings a little bit, but then it comes back to standing still again. So we often think, oh, well, my compassion has gotten so strong, I should be able to open to the suffering in a fearless way. But we haven't built the training and the capacity to the level that it will swing fully and naturally. And we also see that in other people, particularly now where we're seeing some of our heroes, spiritual teachers, make a mistake and get caught in samsara. So even though they have gone, to great lengths of dedication and training, they're still stopping a little short and stopping too soon, like the kids' game of chutes and ladders. So just like us, everyone keeps their training going constantly and wants to build it until the process takes over naturally. And we would say that's at the point where there's a point in the Bodhisattva journey that's called never returning. So that means you're at a point where you never return to confusion. So Shantideva really understood how long we have to stay in the training period, building the trainings. And then if we look at the beautiful expression that Khenchen gave, that one verse where he says, I take all these mind trainings into the center of my heart. And in a sense, we can begin the Tonglen with that one line. So again, following our breath and using our in-breath to say, I see the suffering in the world, and I take all of these trainings and studies in as a commitment and in as a resolve. I breathe in the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I breathe in a moment of mindfulness. I breathe in with a commitment and resolve to engage in the training so that one day I will have a greater and greater capacity. And so Tonglen is a profound training, but first we have to take in a sense of confidence that the trainings are going to contribute to a commitment and a resolve. And really what the resolve is a radical honesty. So the resolve is seeing our shared humanity and using the Tonglen practice to see every time fear arises and say, oh, okay, I see that fear is arising. I see that I have to build the training. So I'm coming back to fear again, and I slowly build my aspiration to train, my confidence in the Dharma and confidence in the training, and then engaging in the training, engaging with resting in meditation, engaging in going back to a verse of any Dharma text or this particular text we've been studying. I'm going to contemplate that verse. I'm going to contemplate it. Some verses I've contemplated for years and years and years and years, and I'm not joking. Literally since before I even saw the verse, I contemplated that question as a hospice worker. How do you open your heart to suffering? And how do you stay open and present to suffering without feeling overwhelmed or feeling fear of the pain that you're witnessing? And then to hear Shantideva express that so beautifully and then give us skillful means. So let's start with Tonglen this morning with the aspiring sense of aspiring to a firm commitment and reviewing one of the trainings, one of the verses that you find particularly helpful or strengthening to your resolve. So we might alternate. What have we seen in our Sangha? Some people are living in Arkansas where COVID is just so high and people are so sick and there's such a lot of ignorance. Some people are in British Columbia and California. I'm watching the California map where literally the Calder fire is at the borderline of the map is at the borderline of Ayasantachita's monastery. The borderline is right at the roof of her home and the home of that wonderful monastery. We see Afghanistan and the cries coming from Afghanistan. So with our eyes open to that, these are the mother sentient beings. Breathing in an openness just to seeing samsara as it's manifesting in this moment of life, and at the same time, breathing in a commitment to be able to keep our eyes open to this suffering and a commitment to the training. And exhaling that commitment, that aspiration on the exhalation to the suffering beings that we're aware of in samsara at this moment. So let's take some time in meditation, just contemplate that, breathing in with our eyes open and exhaling our resolve to train. Breathing in a verse or a contemplation and exhaling our commitment to being with the suffering, not numbing. Let's meditate in this manner for about another 10 minutes. And you can even make it a sentence. I'm keeping my eyes open as I breathe in. I'm resolving to train as I breathe out. and close. So I think what Shantideva expressed so beautifully, the difference between aspiring and engaging bodhicitta, is that aspiring bodhicitta is wanting to go on a trip and essentially finding a map, packing your suitcases, getting on the train, getting on the plane, and then you arrive. Engaging bodhicitta is the arrival. We get caught somewhere in between with shame. But if we think about it that simply, it's totally logical that you have to pack your bag, you have to gather the trainings, then you have to walk out the door. There has to be a kind of resolve that you're going to go to Boston. Then you have to get on the bus or train and you actually physically get there. So it is a process. And we have no shame when we think of it in terms of something so simple as taking a trip, planning a trip, taking the trip and arriving. But we get so easily caught up in, I can't do it, it's not possible for me, there's something wrong with my mind, it's inferior, et cetera, when we think, oh, I should be able, because I want to be able to take in suffering and give away everything. Even in a visualization, even in our imagination, of course, fear arises, vulnerability arises, overwhelming thoughts arise, because we have to pay attention to the amount of training and the stages of training and the growing commitment, the urgency of the commitment, the immediacy. When we connect to the world as family, there's an immediacy and urgency to a resolve. Then we don't waste a moment of practice. Another really young Rinpoche I met in India when he was under 20, he has become a great leader of a huge monastery. He subsequently went into, 18 years in a cave. But what I could see before that is the urgency of the suffering of the world meant that he didn't waste a minute. And, all the time when we were standing in line, waiting for food or waiting to go in a temple, for the big event to start, this 16-year-old was saying mantras. And he was such a respected young person that we went to him for teaching. And while the translator was speaking English, which he didn't understood, he was saying mantras. And then when he could speak and hear the question and answer, he would give a teaching, and then he would say mantras again. He saw that the urgency of suffering and the preciousness of life were so interlinked that at 16, he knew not to waste a single second in the training, in the development. And now he's a hidden person. He's in the Chinese side of Tibet, and has grown into being a great teacher, I understand. So I'd like to give a chance for questions and discussions. Let's break out into small rooms for a short time, just to give a little intimacy to discussion. And I'm going to have them fairly big, even to just introduce yourself and say, what is the suffering that you see where you live? So of course you don't have to go into a breakout room if you don't want to. but will allow people to give some voice. It's tremendously helpful to directly connect with the different parts of the country right now. So we're allowing folks to connect with each other, talk about what they see, and we can rest in meditation. And I'm going to close the Facebook, so when our discussion starts, it will be a private discussion. So thanks to folks on Facebook. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So just resting in compassion, continuing the meditation, strengthening our resolve to walk with fellow beings who are suffering in an open-hearted, responding with compassion manner. And now I'm going to call folks back. So now I think folks are coming back. Okay, so I'm going to switch to group discussion now. You can unmute yourself. Any thoughts or reflections? Yeah, Annie?
A lot of the suffering that I see here in Portland, Maine, is there are a lot of homeless people. There are homeless people everywhere, but particularly in Portland, for different reasons. There are a lot of homeless people who struggle, and there's a lot of controversy about it. And I find it difficult. I try to see them with humanity and not judge them. And it I try to keep my eyes open towards them is my predominant aspiration. It's hard because they always want money, and they may use money for drugs or alcohol. So that's, you don't know, if if you're increasing their suffering, etc. I do try to say hello and at least make eye contact and have some kind of connection to them. And to try not to see them as other, that it could be me, what it would be like if it were me in that doorway with the cardboard signs and all the clothes and suffering. The suffering is so cute, and so there's a lot of mental illness. It's overwhelming, but it does force you to look, I think.
It's very, very true. Yes. I'm sorry, who was trying to speak?
No, I just want to say thank you for that.
Brother David Stendhal Rass just did a beautiful film by he didn't make it, but there was a couple that produced the film in England about the human suffering of homelessness right now. And it was very well done, and I'm happy to share it. It really opened my heart because they interviewed somebody sitting there with a sign, and they asked him his story. And when he shared his story, he was a profound spiritual teacher with what had happened to him and what his life is like. And the thing that struck me is he said, we all are made of the stars. And that was pretty brilliant. Yeah, that I just watched that this week.
What's the name of it, Joanne?
I will have to do a little research, John, but I can certainly email it out to folks. I'm happy to do that. You can watch it. I think it's really quite touching.
Yeah, definitely.
And Venerable asked us to think about what are we seeing? And then we got into a discussion about enough. And she did a beautiful koan, and I wish she would say it again about the butterfly, because things that I'm seeing, like I keep thinking, I've seen enough. Like I have seen enough of all the suffering. Most recently. And yet, Venerable, that poem that you shared, that koan, that was really lovely, and I wish you would write it in the chat.
So I want to say that it's so funny because we don't have very many homeless that we know of. I'm sure there was a lot more. There's a lot of abandoned buildings, but there's one guy, he's in the center of town, and people are taking care of him. It's so beautiful. It just did my heart good. I gave a thumbs up to a couple people that helped him out. And so I'm like all like, giddy and stuff about it. And then I come back and I see another homeless guy, and I don't like the way he looks. And I think, oh, wow, this is amazing. That you went from just because the way he looks. And it was just like, I can understand, Nanny, what you feel. And I think to myself, oh, I shudder at myself.
Mm.
I don't feel particularly negative things about, and I don't like to lump people together. Everyone has a childhood and a story and a history. I just try to say prayers, and that helps me, but sometimes I wonder if it helps them, and I hope it does.
Greg and I have been collecting lots of shampoos from hotels during our travel year. And I said to him yesterday, we're putting these in a bag. I'm calling a homeless shelter because we know more people are going to become homeless with things that are happening up there. And we went over and we dropped it off. And it was gratefully received, and it left joy in our hearts. So
I tried to get small denomination gift cards to cheaper restaurants. So it's not money per se. And here there's a couple campaigns. One is socks, dropping off socks to homeless shelter. And as it turns colder, a bunch of the churches will hang mittens and hats on the fences. So there's a lot that could be done without taking people too far out in comfort zone.
yeah.
And I think it's the giving that makes you feel good. And it's, I think I work at a shelter. I offer service at a soup kitchen and a recovery center, and with a lot of homeless and addicted people. And they're some of the most profoundly honest people I've ever encountered. They haven't got time for BS. They haven't got time for stories. They are on a survival level, but at the same time, I think they're seeing things a lot more honestly and clearly than many of us do, because they haven't got time not to. And it reminds me very much of the butterflies. And thank you for the shampoo and the socks. You have no idea. It's just, when those things come in, it's like Christmas, and we could go out to the day room and just hand out a little shampoo bottle to everybody. And it's like, oh, wow, can I have two? Because I got long hair, and it's just, it really is a blessing. And you don't, because we can, well, some of us don't need to worry about it, but when you go into the bathroom and you have a shower and you get shampoo and you fill your hand with it and your head's all covered with suds, you never stop to think, somebody's sitting on a sidewalk with greasy hair just wishing it could be squeaky clean and soft. And it's that kind of suffering. It doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be like a global weighty thing. If you notice the people around you that are suffering in small ways, and then give them a bottle of shampoo, those are the little things that do tip the balance.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to think, oh, I can't save the world. I can't take on all that weight of suffering. Well, you don't have to. Because once you start alleviating suffering in small ways, you train yourself to stay with suffering, and the bigger and bigger the picture gets, the more and more compassion muscle you've built.
I hope I didn't sound like I was, I was being judgmental at the time, but I'm aware of it, and I don't feel that way now. I mean, I just had an instance of like, oh, and I'm sure everybody does, but I want to clarify that.
Oh, absolutely. We trust that. And that's what I mean about the Tonglen practice being a practice of honesty, really seeing when our, when our self-protection or our fear or overwhelm or like and dislike interrupt the response of giving the shampoo sample.
And Barbara, I've had those moments down at the interstate entrance and exit many times. Like, I can't put $1 through that window. I'll be contributing to something that's not good. So I deal with my judgment all the time.
I'm extremely judgmental. And it's not just towards people who don't have items. It's pretty much towards everybody on some level. But, this keeping our eyes open idea, I just know for me how extremely imperative that is, because even if I, am dealing with someone who is unsheltered on the street, the tendency is to just kind of perfunctory, okay, here's $1, or how you doing, whatever, and get it over with almost. And when I'm able to truly stop and see the human being in front of me, and to really look at the struggle and the suffering that that person is going through. You know, shelters throw you out first thing in the morning. You're sitting outside, whether it's hot or whether it's cold or whether it's rainy. You've got nowhere to go, feeling like no one loves you, no one gives a shit about you. And obviously other struggles of addiction, mental illness, etc. It's not a great life. It's a very difficult, painful life. And I just know when I'm able to stop, and I'm not saying I do that much, but sometimes, and really look and keep my eyes open, the reality of the suffering of that individual becomes acute. And in turn, in my heart, there is a softening because I'm seeing the suffering. And it's not just, let's say, with someone outside. It can be in an interpersonal relationship when I think I'm right with my judgments. When I get into that mode, which just happens a lot, I don't see the suffering of this other being. And when I can get out of that mode through keeping my eyes open, especially, let's say, even in an argument where I think I'm right with someone I know well, I'm able to see the suffering. And when I can see the suffering, it seems like there is this natural tendency to not only soften, but to want to contribute to the healing of the suffering. So I guess what I'm saying is this training about keeping our eyes open is so important in terms of making the commitment to resolve, to train in the ways of bodhicitta. As if any of that makes any sense, but I just guess I'm saying keeping my eyes open, it just seems so paramount in all situations, instead of just me focused.
It makes great sense. And we're going to go into dedication so we can.
Sorry.
No. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. And yet again, my copy has disappeared. Okay. So dedication is a way of offering the roots of all our virtue to all sentient beings. So it's the way we are naturally doing this in our practice. And if we really think about it, it is the other side of Tonglen that you already have become comfortable with. By this virtue may I achieve omniscience, and may all who travel on the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. For this realm encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of every benefit and bliss without exception. Tenzin Gyatso, you who are one with Avalokiteshvara, may you remain steadfast until samsara's end. Embodiment of the three precious jewels, Padmapani, who holds the teachings of the victorious one, seeing the all-goodness meaning with the wisdom eye, may you who are spontaneously established activities live long for hundreds of kalpas. Noble Manjushri, the Lord of Speech, who manifests to hold the teachings of the triple gem, who raises the lamp of the sage's teachings, may you who are the light of the Dharma live long for hundreds of kalpas. The one known in the Holy Land as Aryadeva, emanated into the Gar clan of Eastern Tibet as Chodingpa, the heart son of Jigten Sumgun, may the life of glorious Gyaltshen remain steadfast for 100 eons. So we will look at the second part of the poem using sickness as a teaching and all of life's circumstances as a teaching for Tonglen next week. So thank you again for all your practice. Thanks for coming out really honest and sharing Sangha, and see you during the week, and hopefully in more long-term retreats where we go deeply into practice, developing strength.
Thank you.
If you want
Khenmo,
to specifics of the retreat that's coming up, you asked for a reminder.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to put on the screen His Holiness Chetseng Rinpoche designed a really accessible, all right, now it's frozen, a really accessible meditation practice, meditation training, and it's a framework that you can approach from multiple different perspectives. All right, let's see if I can, oh, it's gone. So it's in the newsletter and on the website. I can't get it on screen at the moment. I have no idea what's happening with my computer at the moment. So starting later in September, mid-September, I'm going to give 3 perspectives on how to work with the framework. And the way I'm going to approach it is what teachings approach the most extreme emotions and extreme difficulties in meditation, and then increasingly more subtle, which we can associate with the teachings of the different eras. And then the other aspect that I find profound in exploring His Holiness's system is it's very much mind-body. He's opened up a lot of the traditional trainings and combined them with Tai Chi and Qigong so that you have a deeper connection to your body that is contributing to your process in this life. So thanks for reminding. I think it starts mid-September, but it's on the website.
Thank you so much.
Also, Khenmo, aren't
Question.
you teaching in Dharma Refuge on the 15th?
Yeah, so really, if you've signed up for the newsletter but aren't getting it, check your junk mail or see if it's being filtered out. Or I can't say that we keep the website updated immediately, but everything that's, or most of the things are coming up. But I'm going to give some talks on the Tara prayer coming up in September as well.
Thank you.
I'll put them up on the website this week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.